Hey guys, it's Claire, the Fiddly Fig Girl, and today I want to talk about the most important topic in the world, how to propagate a fiddly fig plant. I know this topic has so much interest because, I think fiddly figs are kind of expensive, and what's better than one fiddly fig? Well, two. I think a lot of people out there shy away from propagating their plant because it sounds overwhelming, but it's really not. Propagation just means cloning your plant or creating two plants out of one plant. So a different way we could say it is cloning your plant or doing a cutting of your plant to create a second plant. So just because that's a big word doesn't mean you should be scared. It could not be easier. Now there's a few reasons you might want to propagate your plant. The first is that you just want another plant, so you could take a cutting and create another one. The second reason is maybe if your plant is off balance or you need to prune it, you might as well propagate the cutting. If you're going to cut it anyways, you might as well create another plant. And so there's different reasons that people decide to propagate your plant, but I would say, if your plant is off balance, if it has one branch that's really long or that doesn't look right, you can cut it and propagate it. And what I really love to do is to propagate a fiddly fig and put the second plant back in the same pot, so you actually have a group of fiddly figs. They really do well together, and they're a little bit happier if they're together in one pot with other fiddles. And so that's a great idea, is to propagate your plant and then kind of create a bushier or a stronger plant. So let's talk about the tools that you'll need. First of all, you need some pruning shears that are very, very sharp. This is important because you don't want to use dull pruning shears that can crush the stem. That will reduce your chances of successful propagation. The second thing is it's really helpful to use a propagation promoter or a rooting hormone. This gives your plant a signal to put out new roots. And so it's easy to be successful if you use a rooting hormone. You can be successful without it, but it's just a little bit more challenging. So if you really want to give yourself good odds of propagation success, check out our propagation promoter below. It's something that you just are going to put into the water for your new cutting, and it sends a signal that the plant should put out new roots. And then the third thing you need is a container to put your cutting into. And so I recommend just like a clean glass container, like a jar or some kind of, even a plastic cup is fine. You just need a new home for your cutting. So the first step is just to take your cutting. It's best to cut at a 45-degree angle. The reason is that you want to give your cutting as much surface area as possible to grow new roots. So cut at a 45-degree angle, make sure it's a sharp cut, make sure you're not crushing the stem, and just take a cut wherever you want it to be. Now it's important to think about where you want to make your cut. The goal is to have 1 or 2 leaves on your cutting. So you're not going to want to cut off a huge branch. If you did that, you want to cut it down into smaller pieces that have 1 or 2 leaves on each piece. If you have too many leaves, it's really hard for your cutting to support that amount of leaves. If you have too few leaves, you're not going to get enough photosynthesis happening to sprout new roots. So between 1 and 3 leaves is possible to root a cutting, but I think it's easier with 2 leaves per cutting. Now I know it can be a little bit confusing to decide where to cut and how many leaves to cut. I have a whole video on that, so check that out if you're interested and if you're kind of overthinking this process. So the third step is you take your cutting, you put it in water. And so you want to make sure that none of the leaves are touching the water, and you want to make sure to use that rooting hormone or propagation promoter, but you just put it in a place that gets adequate light, so no direct sun. You don't want it to get too hot. You don't want sun on the water itself because that can breed bacteria. So you're going to want to keep this container in a sunny location that has bright and direct light, and then you're going to want to check on it every few days. Make sure that if the water looks cloudy or if it looks kind of like icky, like anything's growing in there, change the water so that you're not having bacteria that can impede the growth of new roots. So check on it every few days, make sure it's doing well. You'll see little root buds form, and then you'll see roots come out. And then when it's time to rehome your cutting is when you have at least 6 roots and at least 1 inch long. And that's kind of the sweet spot that I like to put it into soil at that point. If you put it in too soon, it can be a little harsh for your new root cuttings. And if you put it in too late, it can be a little stressful for the cutting because it's basically existing in water with no nutrition for too long. So you want to look for 6 to 12 roots that are about 1 inch long, and that's when you're going to want to put it into soil. Once you put it into the soil, you're going to want to keep it moist until your roots really take hold. I would say give it a month of being consistently moist, and then once it looks like it's doing pretty well, then you want to water it just like a normal fiddly fig. So you want to let it dry out between waterings and not sit in too much water. One word of caution is when you cut your fiddly fig, the sap that comes out can be a little bit irritating if you were to get it in your eyes or in your mouth. So you want to kind of clean up any sap that drips on the floor. It's just sticky and it can be a little irritating. Make sure no babies or no pets get it on their paws or their hands. So how long does this all take? It takes about 6 to 8 weeks, depending on your plant, for it to get roots long enough that allow it to be repotted. So you take your cutting, check on it at least once a week, and then after 6 to 8 weeks, you should have something something that you can actually plant into soil. I have seen it take as long as 3 months, so maybe don't give up until 3 months or so. But if nothing has happened by the 3-month mark, I would say you probably want to give up and start over. So this gives you the basics of what you need to know about how to propagate a fiddly fig. If you want to learn more, I have a deep dive video on everything you need to know about propagation, and I go through everything you could possibly want to learn. So check out that video, and I'll see you next time.